Okay, good morning everyone, and thank you for your attention over the next 15 minutes. My name is Jonny Tennyson, and I'm here with Fortinet, and today I'm going to be talking about primarily insider threat. I'm going to go on a lot about insider threat, but I promise it is an interesting topic. And the focus of that is mainly going to be around the perimeter within modern business and whether it actually exists. But a little bit of background first. So the ZoneFox product, which is now owned by Fortinet, was originally spun out of Napier University in Edinburgh back in 2011. And we'd shipped our first product to customers in 2013. And we were lucky enough to win a wide range of awards, which we were very proud of. We have a lot of global customers, who I'll go into in my next slide. But our growth curve during the time that we were a startup was significant. And our initial investment went into R&D, and then we used that investment to market and sell ZoneFox to customers on a global basis. So who are we? ZoneFox is an award-winning market leader in user entity behavior analytics, UEBA, as John just mentioned. And we give you critical insights around the data flow within your organization that you need to protect against the insider threat. That's only the second time I've mentioned that. It's coming a few more times. Here's a few of our reference customers here. As you can see, we've got quite a wide range of verticals who need this kind of solution. We believe that everybody needs a solution like this. We've got quite a few recognizable names. We've got the likes of the Scottish Government. We've got Rockstar Games, who use us to protect the Grand Theft Auto series and Red Dead Redemption 2. Huge release at the end of last year. I'm sure you've all played it. And as well as that, we've got some retail customers as well, Pret a Manger and Central England Co-op, Scott Mid, that sort of thing. So, onto the topic itself. This is what cybersecurity has looked like for roughly the last 20 years, 25 years. I'm sure most of you will agree. It's the traditional castle and moat model focused on putting a wall around your data and keeping it safe, much as we looked at in a previous speaker's presentation as well. Now, we've got a lot of very important technologies here, technologies that we couldn't do without. We've got AV, we've got next-gen AV, which everyone's talking about these days, as well as next-gen firewalls, encryption, so on and so forth. They're very, very important, but they are focused around building a wall around your data. What they don't do is they don't look at what's already inside your business, inside the walls, and more importantly, who holds the keys to the drawbridge. So it's time to do something different. This is a saying that I'm sure you've all heard, probably used yourselves many times. It's a definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. That's why we've moved from AV to next-gen AV, firewall to next-gen firewalls, but we still have a threat that is not protected by either of those things. So why is this such a risk in business today? Well, homeworking is something that is becoming much more prevalent these days throughout most industries now. Actually, one of the head of estates and property at a large retail bank recently told us that if everybody turned up to work on the same day, they would have a real problem. They've got too many people, not enough property. And I myself have spoken to two other large financial institutions who said the same. So what they've done is they've started to enforce homeworking. So homeworking isn't just a luxury for some of us, it's something that is actually enforced. And that's becoming more and more prevalent across several industries. And the leader of the TUC recently stated that with the introduction of AI technologies, that our jobs are getting easier to do. Speak for yourself, perhaps. But the introduction of like a 4-day week within the UK is something that we could see probably sooner than we expect. So I've mentioned it a few times. What is insider threat? Well, I think it's very true to say that people are our greatest asset within a business. That's why we spend so much money on them. But they're also our greatest liability, because people don't often act the way you expect them to. They can be unpredictable. You can think that you know how people are acting in your organization, and then they can surprise you. So because of that, they're also our greatest liability. So we see this all the time because this is our specialist area, insider threat. And there are a few different profiles of insider threat that you can identify. So we're going to take a look at some of them now. First up, we have Quentin Quentin. Now, there comes a time in everyone's career where they feel that a change is necessary. I'm sure we all partially relate to this guy here. And if you can't change positions within your organization, you often look to pastures new. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Now, everybody wants to be able to provide value to their new employer whenever they join an organization, but there's a number of ways that they can do this. And one way that is the insider threat way is to take important information from your previous employer to your new one. In fact, we probably are all aware that some employers will have an expectation sometimes that you will bring some data with you. So whenever somebody is looking to leave your business, you've got to be really careful about the types of data that they have access to, because a lot of the time they have access to more data than you think. So anyone who's got access to things like customer data, intellectual property, technical data, and commercial documents is definitely someone to keep an eye on. Next up, we have Disgruntled Dave. We probably have a few disgruntled Daves in the audience. Please do not raise your hands. Your boss may be watching. Disgruntled Dave was a bright and ambitious employee who discovered a defect within this company's upcoming software release. He tried to sway the management to focus on it, but because there was no real-world exploit, they just didn't care. So although he tried to sway their opinion time and time again, he was ignored and ignored once again. So he took to destroying their upcoming software release. So this is someone who's got access to the crown jewels of this company's IP, which is their software. And this type of insider threat is one where they're not looking necessarily to leave your business, but to prove a point. And one thing that's worth mentioning is these types of behaviors and values that this person might have aren't always necessarily very obvious. Just because someone tries to sway your opinion and you beat them back doesn't mean that you go, well, okay, that person's immediately a threat. They might keep that quite well hidden, especially if they're going to sabotage in some way to prove a point. Next up, we have Sandra the Spy. Sandra the Spy is, I guess, a more stereotypical insider threat. Anytime I talk to somebody about insider threat, this is the kind of insider threat that they assume this is what insider threat is all about. And it's not one that's ubiquitous across all organizations, but it's definitely one that's worth focusing on. Now, Sandra the Spy was forced into being a bad actor. She felt like she didn't make enough money, and a competitor entity with fewer morals decided to take advantage of that. Now, as I say, this is not ubiquitous across all industries, but if something like IP are the crown jewels of your organization, then it's definitely worth keeping an eye out for this. And last up I should say, we have Careless Caroline. Now, Careless Caroline is a senior project manager with a number of staff reports, works 100 miles an hour, very well respected within the organization, but doesn't pay attention to InfoSec policy, like a lot of people don't. People in this room probably pay reasonable attention to InfoSec policy because we're at the future of cyber, but a lot of people within your organizations do not. They absolutely don't. We refer this type of insider threat generally to being an accidental data breach, which is hopefully one that you're familiar with. This is one of the most common types of insider threat that we see. And if you want to help somebody like this in their day-to-day job, training and monitoring is absolutely key. So this is your team. They're the best team in the world. They're all incredibly trustworthy, and you have no reason to doubt any of them until they leave you for their competitor, for your competitor. Now, how secure do you feel about that person right now? They may have been very trustworthy, and all of a sudden they're going to go to your biggest competitor. You've got to start worrying about what access do they have. Maybe they've been planning this for months, and maybe they already have a repository of data that they've already exfiltrated or are planning to. whenever somebody hands in their CV, sure, they're obviously immediately an insider threat. But the chances are they've already been an insider threat to your organization for potentially months before they hand their CV in. So it's something to really keep an eye on. And this is something that we see in enterprise getting bigger and bigger. I think it's fair to say that most of these job titles from very big companies were not around, say, 3 years ago. For example, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have seen like a GDPR manager, for example. I promise that is the only time I'll mention GDPR, hopefully this week. If we look at some of these, we've got, they're very senior titles. Head of insider threat, director of insider threat, VP of insider threat, just gets better and better. So there is a proper focus on the insider threat now. And if you're not focusing on it, you really should. And if we take a look at insider threat in the news, so one of the reasons that people are looking at insider threat isn't just because of their data, but because they're seeing it on the news all the time. It's extremely damaging to people's reputations. And if we take a look at some of these, so for example, we've got Tesla, we've got the NHS, they've been in a couple of times. Morrison's, this one was not even recent, but I bet you all remember it because it was massive. They've got loads of security. They're a huge retail company, but some disgruntled employee walked into HR and leaked all their records as if it was just an everyday task. It was very easy for them to do it. I imagine everybody remembers that one. So, to conclude, where we think the perimeter is isn't really where the perimeter is anymore. Not these days, not in 2019. If we take a look at some of the other breaches that we've seen recently, there was BA's, it was huge. They found out where their perimeter really was. And for those of you who don't remember where it was the same place as Ticketmasters. You know, these are big names being breached, and their reputation is taking a massive hit as a result. So it's people who are the perimeter, it's employees, it's our partners and our supply chain. So is there really a perimeter? Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me over the last 15 minutes. I hope this has provoked some interesting thoughts, and please feel free to stop me in the corridor and have a chat about insider threat all of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, John.
That was great. We are in a very mobile world, and the insider threat there to the mobile world. People want to move jobs to better themselves, and as they move jobs, they build up an enormous database of information about each company they've worked for. And don't tell me those people don't share what they know with the new companies that they move to. It's something it's very hard to control. But again, Johnny, good to see you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, John.